Welcome to r/NuclearRevenge, where we share stories of intense payback for someone being wronged. And today's first story is, man gets his car crushed by not paying his repair bill. Not my story, but my father's. Took place in the early 2000s. He's a master mechanic who can literally work on any car, foreign or domestic. He's teaching me right now, and it's an honor to learn from him. He's always run his own independent repair shop almost as long as I can remember. And he told me this story recently that just seems perfect for this sub. So this guy comes in with a pretty nice Chrysler convertible to get his transmission fixed. He had to remove the transmission, disassemble, and rebuild it. Pretty long process, but it's no problem. After a day's work, he calls the customer up, says his car is ready, and reminds him of the agreed upon price of about $1,200. The guy said he could only pay $600 then, and he'd have to get back to him on the rest. Now, this isn't out of the ordinary. Where we live, most people aren't exactly wealthy. And my dad's a nice guy. He single-handedly supported 4 kids and a wife, so we weren't exactly rich. It's not uncommon for people to pay in installments. He doesn't charge interest or fees or anything. Just tries to do what's right. The guy pays half his bill, and with the promise of paying the remaining amount in a few weeks, he leaves with his car. About 2 months pass, however, and the guy hasn't paid. Hadn't even contacted my dad about any issues or to say something like he lost his job or something. So my dad calls him up and asks when he thinks he'll be able to pay the rest of his bill, and I kid you not. This is how the convo went. Dad, hey, this is placeholder name. I was wondering when you'll be able to pay the rest of your bill? Guy, oh. Yeah. About that, I'm not paying it. Dad, surprised, what? Is something wrong with the car? If something went wrong, I'll take care of it. Guy, no. The car runs great. I'm just not gonna pay you. Dad? What? Why? Guy, well, I have the car now, so I don't see any reason to pay you. They went back and forth a bit before my dad realized it was pointless and decided to enact some sweet revenge. He calls up a local towing company and gives them the guy's address, license plate, and care description and tells them to tow the vehicle to the county recycling center. He then calls up the recycling center and say, hey, you're gonna be getting a Chrysler convertible license plate XXXXX from _ towing. When it gets there, I want you guys to crush and recycle it. And so, they do. Car was crushed and recycled. The next day, the guy shows up to my dad's business furious and with the state patrol. My dad explains the entire story, and the cops tell the guy that technically, the vehicle was moved, not stolen. The recycling center received recyclable goods, and not stolen property, and now the car no longer exists, as it's been recycled, and thus was not a criminal matter, but a civil one. So the guy sues my dad, and once again, my dad explains the entire story, and amazingly, the judge says the same thing as the troopers and dismissed. It sounds almost unbelievable, because it just seems so illegal, but if a judge rules in his favor, it's gotta have some merit by a technicality or something. Granted, this was maybe 15 years ago, so the laws could have changed since. But goddamn, the guy gets his car crushed simply because he chose not to pay the remaining repair bill and wanted to take advantage of someone's kindness. Now for the top comments for this post. Yes, your dad has full right to do so. It's called a mechanic's lien. Anytime a car is left with unpaid work at a mechanic, the mechanic can sell the car to recoup losses. This is here in the US. The guy had a written contract. That's why it worked in your dad's favor. Mechanic's lien still has to get filed, and the process needs to go to court before recovering the vehicle and having it sold to recoup damages. Even if that process had gone through, it still does not allow for the car to be stolen and destroyed. This story is fake as hell. Usually, mechanic's lien will only pretty it from being sold out having a loan taken against it. Your dad is a very nice man to even let the guy take his car without paying his entire bill. I know around me, unless I'm really good friends with the mechanic, there is no way they will let me take my car with a balance unpaid. Great revenge though. I'm sure because your dad was so nice to everyone, the towing company and recycle company were more than happy to help him out, because he's probably helped them out a few times before. I can imagine the judge had a record that showed the guy was the type of scumbag that never paid up his debts, and let this be the hard lesson to show him there is interest to pay when screwing over. And likely the judge had a character report from people that your father did this for, saying he saved my job or something far worse by doing the payment plan without interest, and knowing your father was an asset to the community and cheap ass was what makes places suck and people like your father not extend goodwill to the community. He told the guy he could kiss his ass because a scum like that do not deserve to have nice things done for them, reinforcing their bad behavior and punishing your father for sticking up for himself and teaching that asshole a lesson he'll now never forget. Learn maybe, but he paid for it either way. Your dad is awesome in an old school way. I mean, what he did was illegal and therefore the judge would have sided in his favor, but it would have never gotten to that point because the initial state trooper would have arrested the mechanic then and there. Ha 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 ha, the car was moved, not stolen. Yeah, that's how car theft works. A mechanic that releases a car without getting the remaining payment due? Ha 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 ha, no. I have the car now, so I don't have any reason to pay you. Even an idiot knows lawsuits exist, which was your father's only actual recourse if this story was true. The recycling center just crushed and recycled a car without knowing anything about who owns it and not asking for any papers? Lamau nope, try again. This story is faker than a $3 bill. It's not even a good fake. Read like it was written by a 12-year-old who thinks he knows how things work but doesn't. Okay, now time for story 2. What's his most prized possession? I will destroy it. Kind of a long one, but on the plus side, the only story I am likely to ever post here. This happened back in 1989. The story involves my stepdad, biological dad, Donald Duck, and my sister, Sis. The person who exacted the revenge has passed now, so it should be safe to relate. I hope it meets the requirement for nuclear revenge. It is a revenge that would warrant prison time, I believe. I was living outside the country when this happened, so my sister relayed all of this information to me about a year after it happened. We recently got together again and went over the events again. My biological parents married when they were very young and Donald Duck was still in law school. The marriage lasted long enough to produce 2 children. They didn't waste time in those days, my sister, who is 14 months my elder, and myself. They were divorced before I was born. Donald was a serial cheater, a pathological liar, and a total a-hole. He still is at least a liar and a-hole. He's in his mid-70s now, so maybe not so much with the cheating. The fact that he is still working as a lawyer I think is indicative that he was never a good one, as he evidently doesn't have enough to retire. I've looked up reviews on him online and it's funny to see that most reviewers say that he is not only a terrible lawyer, but a horrible person. When Sis was 22 she was a single mother and my nephew, her son, was around 3. Her company transferred her to another state. She discovered that Donald Duck lived in a town near her new work location and thought that he might be able to help her get her bearings in a new place. For a short time when we were teenagers, he has some sporadic involvement in our lives after moving to a neighboring city. It was mostly him trying to impress us with how cool and rich he thought we should think he was. So, though it had been a few years since she had seen him, it's not like they were complete strangers. In any case, Donald Duck agreed to let Sis move into his apartment with him, his girlfriend at that time, of course many years his junior, and her 9-month-old child, not Donald's, until she was able to find her own place. He also offered to allow her to keep her belongings in his storage unit. Sis took him up on his offer. Never did Donald Duck make any reference to being paid for the use of the storage unit or paying for utilities at the apartment. Sis stayed 3 months and did her best to get out as quickly as she could and as far as she could once she became more familiar with the area. Living with him was hard. Did I mention he is an a-hole? And her young son would find his pregnant lady porno mags around the apartment. This is obviously pre-internet. Mr. Duck's young girlfriend was able to help with babysitting, something Sis paid her for. So Sis gets her own apartment, but all of her things, her son's toys, furniture, her furniture, household items, everything but her own bed was still in the storage unit. So she called him to figure out how she could get her things back, but he seemed to want to hang on to them for some reason. He said, "You owe girlfriend money for babysitting and you can't get your things back until you pay her." She said, "Have you talked to her?" "I have paid her everything I owed her." He puts down the phone and talks to girlfriend and she confirms that she has been paid. He then says, "Well, you owe a third of the utilities for the time you were here." She reminded him that he had never said anything about that. He gets a little heated and she's feeling desperate and angry and shouts an accusation of something he did to her when she was very young, a totally different story. He responds, "Have you ever told anyone that?" She says no. He says, "If you ever do, I will wring your fucking neck." And the conversation ends. She had given up and thought she would never see her things again. About 20 minutes later she gets a call from an acquaintance who had actually gone on 1 or 2 dates with Donald before she met my sister. He tells Sis that Mr. Duck had just called her asking if Sis had ever told her anything that he might have done to Sis, hinting at the accusation Sis had made. Sis had never told anyone and the acquaintance told Donald as much. Sis later calls my stepdad, whom we have always considered to be our dad. He is the only father we knew growing up and he was in the picture since before we were old enough to remember. He married my mom when I was an infant and my sister a toddler. They were married 40 years until my mom's death. The guy absolutely had a lot of faults, passed on 2017, and we often felt better when he wasn't around, but he tried and it's not easy raising someone else's kids, and he was our dad as far as we were concerned. He actually legally adopted us. He had a lot of issues, but he absolutely hated to see someone be taken advantage of because they were in a weaker position. In other words, he hated a bully and Donald Duck was being a bully. When I was in the first grade I rode a school bus with middle and high school students. There were a couple of kids who would bully me. When he found out he confronted the bullies' dads and it ended. Another time, I was in the third grade and driving somewhere with him in his pickup around town and he saw 2 young teenagers destroying a bicycle that he assumed they had stolen. He stopped and confronted them with his big framing hammer, of 16 ounces, I have one like it in his honor. Years later he broke my mom out of a mental institution by threatening the director, or some doctor, I'm not sure, I was young, with that same hammer. Yes, we were a fun family. That same hammer. Anyway, when Sis calls him explaining that Donald Duck is holding all of her possessions hostage and she doesn't know what to do, he tells her that he knows several Crips who would be happy to rough him up and wouldn't even want to be paid, they would do it for pleasure. Dad was very bothered that Donald was keeping his grandson's things from him and wanted to hurt Mr. Duck. Sis declines this offer. He then asks her, what is the thing that he values most in this world? She responds, his car. His car at that point was a Porsche he had purchased new just a few years before. It wasn't quite the absolute entry-level model, but pretty close. Of course he had all kinds of arguments about why it was actually better than the more expensive ones. Obviously it was red. Dad was trying to come up with a way not only to get revenge, but to scare Mr. Duck enough to force him to give Sis back her things. Sis said she was fine with whatever he wanted to do if it got her belongings back, but wanted to make sure none of it could be traced back to her. Nothing happens until about a month later and Donald Duck calls Sis out of the blue as if nothing had ever happened and asks, hey, when would you like to come get your things? How about this Saturday? Evidently, he had some change of heart that is unexplained to this day. She said sure. She didn't trust him so she didn't want to go alone. She was able to get a male friend to go with her. She gets a U-Haul and just picks up her stuff and gets out. That very evening she tried several times to call Dad to let him know that she got her things back and all was well, no need for any drastic measures. But it was too late, the wheels had been set in motion. He never answers the phone. Remember, this is pre-cell phone days, so when you're not at home, you don't answer. Sis calls Mom, who was living separately from Dad for a time. It's complicated, telling her she can't reach Dad. Mom says Dad is sick and that's probably why he's not answering his phone. At 11:30 p.m. Sis gets a call from Donald's girlfriend who asks her, what are you doing? Sis replies, I am at home in bed. Why? She responds, someone just blew up Donald's car. Sis's heart drops. She obviously knows who did it. The police ask Donald Duck who would want to do this to him and he answers Sis's name, so she becomes suspect number 1. Sis asks girlfriend if Donald is scared. Girlfriend says yes, they are spending the night in a hotel. Fortunately, the call from girlfriend to Sis just a few minutes after the explosion gave Sis her alibi. Sis lived over 30 minutes away and could not have answered her home phone if she had been the one to ignite the bomb. The bomb did its job well. It turned the Porsche into an unrecognizable wreck, took out the adjacent car. The Porsche was parked at the end of the carport, so there was only one car parked next to it, and destroyed many feet of the carport above both cars. I'm guessing the tank in the Porsche was near full. Just after Sis gets off the phone she calls Mom, telling her that someone blew up Mr. Duck's car and she thinks it was Dad. While she is on the phone with Mom, another call comes in, call waiting, a fancy feature in the days of landlines. It's Dad. He says mysteriously, there is a box outside your door. Bring it in. You never talked to me tonight. Sis is a little afraid to open the box, but it turns out to be just some of her son's items that he had left with his grandpa, clothes and toys. Months later at Christmas, Sis asked Dad about it and he confessed. Turns out he really was very sick, physically, when he pulled that stunt. Sis was touched that he would go to so much effort and risk jail time for her, all while being ill. She asked him if he was scared driving back. He said yes, and that every headlight behind him he took to be a cop until he reached the state line. Sis found out from girlfriend that the cops said the job was very amateur, certainly not the work of professional. But hey, it did the job. Dad told Sis he had asked a co-worker who was once a member of the aforementioned Crips about how to make a car bomb and she instructed him. He always did love blowing things up. When I was 13 we bonded over crumbling up the old colored sparklers into powder. I don't think they make the colored ones anymore, but they burned hotter, funneling the powder into a spent CO2 cartridge, using another sparkler as a fuse and making bombs powerful enough to blow up those old metal milk cans that hold a few gallons. It was the 4th of July. Anyway, Sis says it was some sort of Molotov cocktail stuffed into the tailpipe, but I'm not sure how that would work. My idea of a Molotov cocktail is a 750 milliliters sized bottle, like a wine bottle or a fifth of booze, which would not fit into the tailpipe of a 4-cylinder Porsche I wouldn't think. I'm guessing the diameter is no more than 2 inches, not big enough to fit such a bottle. Maybe he used a smaller bottle or simply a smaller container of some kind, not a bottle, filled with something very ignitable. I truly regret not discussing it with him personally, but we weren't close since I left home. If you didn't need him, he had a hard time having a relationship with you. Plus I was married to a woman for many years who kept me from my parents and siblings, so I don't have better details. Thank God that 25-year marriage is over and my current wife loves my family. Sorry. But the story is true. One hilarious detail, Donald Duck continued to father offspring and date very young women. His current wife is my age exactly and he has a daughter many years younger than my youngest child. A couple of years ago, I had a conversation with one of these half-sisters, a marvelous person despite half her DNA. Her mother was never married to Donald and this sister is the age of my youngest daughter. I told her the story of the exploded Porsche. She found it very amusing because she says Donald loves to tell a story about how he was prosecuting some mob bosses and a couple of thugs came to his door trying to threaten him. Of course, being the big bad brave man he is, he did not back down. And what was his reward? Those thugs blew up his car. I think it's hilarious that he tells this story to his children but now they know the truth. He is the biggest bullshitter I have ever met. Also, due to Donald's allegation that it was my sister who blew up his car, what? Not mobsters, but a 22-year-old girl? The condo association or whatever tried to sue my sister for the damage to the carport. It came to naught. They were grasping at straws because there was no evidence of course, but it did scare her and cause some anxiety. Now for the top comments for this post. Question: after Sis's phone call with Donald, why didn't she just say fuck it, him calling his girlfriend and tell her about the accusations that Donald did to her? It's not like he would have actually wrung her neck as that was an empty threat as since they weren't living together at that point. It's not like he knew where she lived. Hi there. I'm Sis. While living with DD I did tell the girlfriend things he had done when I was little. The girlfriend, who was 19 at the time and I was 22, told me she had recently gone to a psychic and the psychic even told her DD has done terrible things to his daughter when she was little. I never kept in touch, but I'm pretty sure I heard through the grapevine the girlfriend moved out with her baby daughter shortly after the whole incident. His threat to me was very unnerving and wasn't sure what he was capable of. I felt he was keeping me hostage by holding on to all my belongings. I was new to the state and had not yet developed a community of support, no family or friends at that point. I felt utterly alone with my 2.5-year-old son. DD is a piece of work. I still don't understand what caused Donald Duck to give Sis her things. Had he been threatened? The car explosion came after Sis got her possessions, didn't it? Well, if she didn't respond to his threats he might just have gotten bored with it. It's no fun blackmailing someone who doesn't care, at least as far as you know. People like this, they do the things they do for the emotional response it causes. They thrive on that. No emotional response means no gain for them. Or he just simply had a bad day and she called and gave him a perfect opportunity to take it out on her. If the point never was to actually take it from her or squeeze money out of her but just to be an ass to her in that moment, well then he'd probably just forget about it again later. Whoa, wait a second, I'm in the middle of reading this. WTF did your stepdad feel the need to break her out of a mental institution? Okay, proceed. I think he thought they were holding her needlessly or giving her treatment that was detrimental. I'll ask Sis, maybe she remembers better. I remember that he felt he was protecting her. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and comment your thoughts below.